of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. I encourage you all to learn more about the traditional territory on which you work and live. Now, today's event would not be possible without the generous support of our incredible sponsors. The Empire Club is a nonprofit organization, and our sponsors generously support the club and make these events possible and complimentary for our online viewers to attend. So please join me in thanking our lead sponsors, Bruce Power and RBC Capital Markets. Thank you. Thank you to our VIP reception sponsors, Waste Connections of Canada, Alto, Algoma Steel, BMO, Cameco, Can-Do Energy Inc., and Atkins Realis Company, Enbridge, Global Public Affairs, Leuna, McKinsey & Company, the Ontario Road Builders Association, and TD. Thank you all. And thank you to our supporting sponsors, BWXT, CAP or CAPP, Humber Polytechnic, Hudbay Minerals Inc., Invenergy, Northland Power, Siemens Energy, TC Energy, Vail, and Trigon Pacific Terminals. Thank you all. We also deeply appreciate the ongoing support of our lead season sponsors, Bruce Power, Hydro One, and National Bank Capital Markets, and our VIP reception season sponsors, Ellis Don, McKinsey & Company, the Ontario Road Builders Association, and Waste Connections of Canada. And finally, thank you, partner, Bespoke Audiovisual. Thank you. If you have questions for our speakers, please scan the QR code found on your program or through the Q&A function if you're online. For those of you online, if you require technical assistance, please use the chat feature. Now, 1 year ago, the new federal government took office, led by Prime Minister Mark Carney. Since then, the government has been navigating turbulent economic headwinds and choppy trade waters, to say the least. The challenge has been made clear: to think bold, to act big, and invest in building Canada up. Before us is the opportunity to diversify our global reach and reclaim lost ground, and while being collaborative, ensure that we are competitive on multiple fronts, including energy, natural resources, and AI. 1 year in, the sense of urgency remains, with results dependent on continued agility and sharp focus, which brings us to the conversation that we are having today. Canada, as we all know, is facing urgent and dynamic challenges in a world that seems to be shifting daily. That is why we need to leverage our natural strengths, or as Minister Hodgson and Prime Minister Carney like to say, we must build strength right here at home. And we must build at speeds not seen in generations, particularly in our strategic energy sector. For the past year, that is what Canada's government has been attempting to do. And that is what brings our keynote speaker here today. Now, earlier this week, Minister Hodgson appeared on CBC's The Current, and he framed our collective challenge clearly and simply. He said that our allies are desperate for a reliable, rules-based provider of energy, and that that's an opportunity for Canada to step up in the world and to lead. Today, Minister Hodgson will report on what's been a pivotal year for our country and share insights as to what comes next. Now, conversations of this scale require great partners. So I want to recognize our lead sponsor today, RBC Capital Markets. Trevor Gardner is head of global investment banking coverage at RBC Capital Markets. RBC plays a central role in financing the major projects that drive our country. Please join me in welcoming Trevor to the podium.
Thank you, Saurabh, and thanks to the Empire Club of Canada for hosting today's luncheon and convening such an important conversation on Canada's economic future. It's terrific to see this room packed on such an important topic. As Saurabh mentioned, I'm Trevor Gardner. I'm here to represent RBC. We're really proud to be here and sponsoring this important conversation. We've long sponsored investments in Canada, working alongside governments and companies in all sectors to grow their businesses and compete globally. We've been steadfast in our support of important sectors like energy and mining through a range of market environments, public criticism, and economic cycles. We see our role as supporting Canadian industry, taking Canada to the world, and bringing the world to Canada. Canada's economic opportunity rests on a powerful combination: abundant resources, cutting-edge innovation, talented people, and democratic stability. We are seeing this play out in real time in client dialogues all over the world. Critical resources are now strategic assets, and the race to secure them is intensifying globally. Canada truly has a defining opportunity to be a trusted, stable supplier of the energy and critical resources our allies depend on, whether that's oil, natural gas, minerals, or a range of power solutions. We're not just resource-rich, though. We're innovative and we're reliable. That's our edge. As an example of our innovation, look no further than the nuclear sector. We are advancing world-leading technology, coupling our resource strength with technical prowess and cutting-edge innovation that the world needs and wants. But the world's changing rapidly. We need to act with pace to seize the opportunity in front of us. And delivering on that edge means aligning capital, policy, and execution. That's how we turn Canada's potential into prosperity. This brings me to today's guest, the Honourable Tim Hodgson, Minister of Energy and Natural Resources and Member of Parliament for Markham Thornhill. Minister Hodgson brings a distinguished career spanning both global finance and public service. He spent over 2 decades in senior banking roles where he advised institutional clients across major markets. He later served as Special Advisor to the Bank of Canada, was Chair of Hydro One prior to his election, guiding one of Canada's most important infrastructure companies through a period of transformation and strengthened focus on long-term value creation. In his role as Minister of Energy and Natural Resources, since May 2025, Minister Hodgson has brought a pragmatic, action-oriented approach to pivotal nation-building projects. He played a leading role in advancing Canada's work under the G7 Minerals Production Alliance, mobilizing close to $20 billion, while strengthening Canada's position as a trusted energy and resource supplier globally. We see it every day and we hear it from clients. We're encouraged by his open and accessible approach to industry, capital markets, and other stakeholders. With Minister Hodgson's global perspective and deep understanding of Canada's strengths, we look forward to his reflections on the path ahead. Please join me in welcoming the Honourable Tim Hodgson.
Thanks so much for that kind introduction. Hello, everyone. Bonjour à tous. And thank you to the Empire Club for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here and to see so many familiar faces in the crowd. I also want to give a special shout out to a few people, in particular, the former Ministers of Energy and Natural Resources who are here, Lisa Raitt and Seamus O'Regan. I'm standing on your shoulders. Thank you for your service. I also want to, I know there are many people who have served in many capacities, but I want to give a shout out to currently serving Julie Durowitz, the MP for Davenport, one of my colleagues who's here today. She's going to report back to the PM on whether I screw up or not. So, ladies and gentlemen, a year ago today, Canadians were 4 days away from casting our ballots in an election that I believe marked a turning point for this country. You will remember it had been a tumultuous period in Ottawa, to say the least, across the country and around the world. For the first time in decades, the question of Canada's survival felt truly existential. From coast to coast, Canadians were asking ourselves not only who we are as a country, but what do we want to be as a country? And how do we survive and thrive in a world where maybe there's no free trade? For a year now, we've been answering these questions together as one nation, a nation with a proud identity and a unique history, a nation that, yes, has some distinct challenges, but also has an unmatched resource base anywhere in the world and the foundation to do some truly great things. But ladies and gentlemen, a foundation does not a house make. That is why our government, and especially my job as Minister of Energy and Natural Resources, has in many ways one singular mission: to build Canada. For too long, Canadians felt overly secure in the hands that we had been dealt: abundant resources, a world order generous to middle powers like Canada, and a social safety net that provided a decent quality of life for most Canadians. To return to the house metaphor for a moment, perhaps most of all, we enjoyed the tranquility of a neighborhood in the world which we grew up in, with a neighbor to our south who cooperated with us, who helped protect us, and shared generously with us. It's now clear that world has changed. Economic integration with our neighbor, once a strength, has been weaponized against us. It's time we have to stop relying on neighborhood watch. And
hey, babe.
Hey. 8th, 2025, Canadians told us and each other one very clear thing. They no longer wanted to be complacent about the neighborhood or the world we live in. They wanted a government that would not just govern Canada, but protect it and fight for it in this new world. Canadians also knew that, while legitimate and important, we had to put our internal differences aside. Because if we were divided, we could be conquered. And we may have had our rose-colored glasses ripped off rather abruptly, but Canadians are now prepared to see this country and the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. We have elected a Prime Minister capable of leading a whole coalition of nations looking to do just that, to build strategic autonomy in a world where great powers feel unbounded by rules, by traditions, or by economic norms. I think it's safe to say that over the past year, we have rethought almost everything about our place in the world. I hope you feel like your federal government has been doing that with you, and that you know that we have your back in this new world, which often feels dangerous and uncertain. Just a week after I was sworn in to Prime Minister Carney's cabinet as Minister of Energy and Natural Resources, I flew to Calgary and gave a speech in a room not too dissimilar to this one. I said Canada needed to stop admiring its advantages and start using them. Because energy and natural resources do not make us prosperous when they are sitting in the ground. I said a country does not become more sovereign simply by saying it wants to be more sovereign. We do it by thinking and acting like a country that knows how to build for itself. That means we need to build a Canada defined by delivery, not delay. That premise, delivery, not delay, is in many ways, it has been the organizing idea behind my first year in this role as minister. When I took office, the thought of building big things like we used to again felt nearly impossible. We were mired in slow bureaucracy, duplicative, overly complicated permitting and regulatory processes, and apathy about the need to build. Ladies and gentlemen, we still have a long way to go, but a year into our mandate, it no longer feels impossible. Let me speak plainly about what we've done over the past year to transform Canada. The first thing we needed to do was improve the federal government's ability to move with clarity, with purpose, and with speed. That's why standing up the Major Projects Office was so important. Too often it is assumed that the problem in Canada is that we have overly high standards. On the contrary, I believe our standards are a strength. They build social license, and they mean we do things right the first time around. But the path to achieving and evaluating these standards across government was fragmented, duplicative, and difficult to navigate. It made public and private sector alike feel like even the best projects and ideas would be crushed under the weight of bureaucracy. Launched last August, just a few months after we passed the Building Canada Act, the Major Projects Office attacks this very problem. It creates a clear path, a one-stop shop for proponents, and a place in the federal government that represents a laser-focused mission to get big things built. We've now referred 15 projects and 6 transformative strategies to this office, representing over $126 billion of new investment in this country. And ladies and gentlemen, we are just getting started. That matters because one of the quiet but damaging habits Canada had developed over the years was a tendency to speak in general terms about growth while hesitating to act on specific opportunities to create growth. But countries do not become stronger by speaking generally. They become stronger by making concrete decisions about real projects, and that's exactly what we're doing at the MPO. That same focus on practicality and specifics has shaped our work with provinces, especially when it comes to signing a first-of-a-kind memorandum of understanding with Alberta. The Canadian-Alberta MOU signaled something simple but powerful. Not only do Canada and Alberta share the goal of being a clean and conventional energy superpower, but we are prepared to put politics aside to achieve that for Canadians. I was in the room when the MOU was signed. It was incredibly powerful to watch Albertans, literally with tears of joy and relief in their eyes, express that they once again felt like they had a place in Canada. It was an expression of the best of what Canada has to offer. Diverse perspectives, working towards a more united and a prosperous nation. That's what we're trying to do. We continue to work hard on a daily basis with Alberta on agreements on carbon pricing and the Pathways project, and we look forward to receiving Alberta's pipeline proposal and finalizing a framework for AI data centers by July 1st. Early wins from the MOU include signing agreements on methane emissions and on one project, one review. Less than 3 years after we were fighting over environmental assessments at the Supreme Court. That's what unity looks like. And there's more good news. We've moved faster on one project, one review than any government in Canadian history. We've worked province by province to make progress on agreements that reflect realistic yet ambitious agreements for goals and standards. We've done this with Alberta. We've done this with Manitoba. We've done this with Ontario. We've done this with New Brunswick. We've done this with Nova Scotia. We've done this with Newfoundland and Labrador. We've done this with Prince Edward Island, and we already have an agreement with British Columbia. And again, we're not done. It's been just 12 months, but ladies and gentlemen, Canada is building. Let me give you an example. The Silesum LNG project, a $30 billion Indigenous-led project with emissions 94% below the global average, proved the point with one project, one review. When it was approved by the government of British Columbia at 4 p.m. last fall and by the federal government at 4:30 the same day. That's what one project, one review does for project proponents. The last time we built a new uranium mine and it was approved for construction in Canada, it was in 2004. In the first 2 months of 2026, we approved 2 new mines which together will produce enough uranium to power 40 million homes. We approved the Taylor to Gordondale pipeline expansion, which will significantly reduce our reliance on other countries for the diluent that moves our oil to market. We approved this not only because it's a good project, but because we are no longer afraid of the P word. Because we recognize that projects should be about prosperity, not politics. Now, I'm excited to announce another pipeline project approval for the Sunrise expansion in British Columbia that was announced this morning. This project, owned by Enbridge and most importantly, 38 First Nations, is approved today and scheduled to start construction this summer. It will provide up to 300 million cubic feet a day of additional transportation capacity on British Columbia's major natural gas transmission system. This will enable us to heat more homes, businesses, and hospitals and schools in British Columbia, in addition to providing gas for electric power generation, industrial manufacturing processes which are expanding in British Columbia. This expansion ensures British Columbia has enough gas to supply an LNG export facility like wood fiber LNG, which will be the first net zero LNG export facility in the world. This project, the Sunrise project, will add more than $3 billion to Canada's GDP and generate over $700 million in tax revenues for new roads, new hospitals, and new schools in British Columbia. At peak production, it will create 2,500 new jobs, including for local Indigenous communities. In fact, to date, more than $52 million has already been spent by Enbridge on hiring and procuring services from Indigenous businesses. Ladies and gentlemen, these are not random examples. They represent a broader change in Canada's posture. For too long, we became accustomed to mistaking delay for seriousness. But seriousness is not measured by how long it takes to make a decision. It's measured by whether those decisions are thoughtful, credible, and made in a time frame that actually matters for the proponent. The same larger story can be seen in our work to diversify trade and exports. For years, Canada talked about turning our immense gas resources into the ability to be a major global LNG exporter. Well, look at what's going on in the Middle East today. Last summer, the first LNG cargoes left Canada for Asia, marking a new era for Canadian energy exports and giving us really important cards in the world that we live in. Since then, we have also reset our relationship with China and India, the second and fourth largest markets on Earth.
Discover today at participating stores. Collect all 5 unique Disney Plush keyrings, including Winnie the Pooh, Mickey Mouse, Marie, Simba, and
countries to supply. Now we are opening these enormous markets up to thousands of Canadian farmers, miners, energy producers, and small businesses. And the Prime Minister is far from finished. In less than 12 months, he has signed 20 new trade deals on 4 continents, touching almost every sector of the economy. These trade deals allow Canadian companies to grow here at home and international companies to come and invest here in Canada. Our determination to build can also be seen in the critical minerals sector. Right now, global production and processing are concentrated and controlled by hegemonic powers in a way that threaten our economy and our national security. It does not have to be that way. We have the rocks the world wants beneath our feet, and we have one of the world's best mining sectors right here in Canada. We are now moving urgently. Thank you. We are now moving urgently to use these resources to create capacity to produce and process critical minerals domestically. That matters not only for our economic growth and resilience, but also because when we put cards in our hands that others want, it gives us influence in the world and in our upcoming trade negotiations. To that end, in 2025, we used our G7 presidency to launch the Critical Minerals Production Alliance. Over the last 6 months, since its official launch, we have announced 56 deals in the critical mineral space with every G7 country, plus Finland, plus Denmark, plus Australia, plus Estonia, plus Luxembourg, and plus Ukraine. These deals unlock $18.5 billion to be invested in Canadian projects. These are real dollars going to real specific projects that will be selling minerals around the world shortly. The same broader strategy has shaped our work in the forestry sector, which I often say was really the canary in the coal mine when it comes to American tariffs. It is said that the definition of madness is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Well, I spent part of my childhood in a forestry town, and unfortunately I saw firsthand that that is exactly what we have been doing as we faced 5 different tariff wars with Americans, which have devastated Canadian towns from coast to coast. That's why our strategy is about pivoting to grow. Our goal for the Canadian forestry sector is not only for the sector to survive, but thrive again in every one of the 300 rural and Indigenous communities who depend on forests for their livelihood. The U.S. market is not how we unlock this prosperity going forward. Instead, we're looking to new international partners who are hungry for Canadian wood and baking that into the deals we're signing. In fact, in January, when I was in China with the Prime Minister, one of the major areas of trade collaboration we agreed on was in the forestry sector, opening up new markets for Canadian producers. We're also pivoting inward with respect to using our own wood. That's not inherently a bad thing, despite some traditional orthodoxy. I believe strongly that the Canadian forestry sector should benefit more from Canadian customers, and Canadian customers should benefit more from the Canadian forestry sector. That's why Build Canada Homes is focused on using Canadian mass timber to build affordable homes here in Canada. These were the 2 challenges I gave the Federal Forest Sector Transformational Task Force when they started their work in January. Last week I received their report, and I'm excited to announce it will inform a targeted new national forest strategy which we are developing in partnership with provinces, territories, and Indigenous peoples, and which I look forward to sharing with Canadians later this year. So let's talk about how we move forward from here. I'm proud of the work this government has done to build Canada strong so far. But if we can meet our goals in just 1 year, our goals were not ambitious enough. Friends, the stakes are only rising, something the volatility in the Middle East over the last 2 months has brought into sharp focus. That means the next phase of our work to build Canada strong will be even more important. So as I did in Calgary 1 year ago, I'm going to spell out my year 2 goals as your energy minister and ask you and all Canadians to hold me accountable. First, Canada needs a coherent strategy for electricity and nuclear energy because every major ambition we have, from AI to advanced manufacturing to mineral processing, depends on reliable, affordable electricity. By this time next year, not only will these strategies be announced, but they will be in their implementation phases. Second, we need to keep moving big projects from approval to final investment decision to construction and ultimately to production. In the spring of 2027, you will see projects not just having been added to the Major Projects Office, but at least 5 to 10 new projects having reached final investment decision or broken ground. Third, I want our energy and natural resources sector to play the strategically important role it should be playing as Canada's strongest cards in the CUSMA renegotiation. I spent my life doing deals. Ultimately, it's about knowing which cards are your best and playing them effectively. Well, ladies and gentlemen, energy, electricity, forest products, minerals, these are our best cards. Fourth, we need to complete the practical work underway on the Canada-Alberta MOU. And yes, that includes the upcoming steps in the discussion on a new West Coast pipeline, a project that could add an average of $31.4 billion to our GDP every year for the next decade, equivalent to increasing Canada's entire GDP by 1.1% annually. But equally importantly, it also includes work to unlock a step change in the carbon intensity of Canada's oil sands and to take a massive step towards net zero through the Pathways Project, a project that, as Premier Smith said when we spoke on a panel together at CERAWeek in Houston, will future-proof our oil industry. The MOU also includes plans for nuclear and AI data centers in Alberta, the new export infrastructure across Western Canada. It resets how we think about Indigenous participation in natural resource projects. It is all of these pieces that make the MOU so important for Alberta, but also for Canada. Fifth, and most importantly, I want it to be clear to every person in this country that their life is better in the spring of 2027 than it is today in the spring of 2026. That means it needs to be safer, it needs to be more affordable, and it needs to be more optimistic. Friends, the plans that I've been describing are mostly long-term. That's the nature of the industries for which I'm responsible and the scale of the national challenge in front of us. However, I believe in many ways that this challenge is the antidote to the political quick fixes, the clickbait, and the Band-Aid solutions that governments of many stripes have employed for years. At the same time, we know that Canadians need to be able to get a good job, buy a comfortable home, and afford your groceries today. The Prime Minister gets that. Your government gets that. That's why we canceled the GST for first-time home buyers, the consumer carbon price, and the federal excise tax on gas and diesel until Labor Day. It's why you will get the first Canada Groceries and Essentials benefit in your bank account on July 5th. And it's why we cut taxes for 22 million Canadians. Because that is really what government is about, the hard, steady, practical work of making Canadians' lives better tomorrow than they are today. So in conclusion, history, and for those of you who are closer to my age with gray hair, experience tells us that nations are tested not when everything is going well, but when crisis strikes. That is when you find out whether a country still knows how to act on its advantages. I believe Canada knows how to do that. Over the last year, I've seen it with my own eyes. Our government is honored to play its part, and I'm immensely grateful to have someone like Prime Minister Carney steering the ship for all of us. But we need to understand, in a democracy, a government is only as inspired and only as ambitious as the people from whom it gets its mandate. I believe that Canadians are ready to make tough decisions again. I believe Canadians are ready to build big things again and take seriously the responsibility that comes with our resource wealth, our geography, and our position in the world. We understand with newfound clarity that the privilege of economic strength is not something future generations of Canadians will automatically inherit, but something each generation must renew for the Canadians that will follow them. Today, I see a Canada that will no longer be seen as a commentator or a caretaker of a world order that has ceased to exist. I see a Canada that is now a leader of a new world order that moves past idealism to operate with clear-eyed pragmatism and effectiveness today. I'm grateful for the opportunity to look back on this first year with you here today, but if I can leave you with one thing, it's not something to look back on in 2025. It is what we want our children and our grandchildren to look back on when they judge how we met this moment. Simply put, my hope for them is they will see that when the world changed, this generation of Canadians did not yearn for times past or didn't languish in nostalgia. Instead, we got to work and build Canada strong for us and most importantly for them. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
All right, there you have it. We are going to forego the questions and discussion portion and leave that up to you. Again, put your comments in the comment area. We'll see you